On the night of November 14th, 2023, the CCTV cameras inside the Gilded Table in downtown Chicago captured something that defies explanation. Arthur Sterling, a tech billionaire worth $40 billion, was cornered by 4 professional hitmen while eating a steak alone. Security was minutes away. He should have been dead. But the attackers made one fatal calculation error. They ignored the waitress pouring the water. They didn't know that the woman in the apron wasn't just serving tables, she was hunting. And in 30 seconds of grainy footage, she didn't just save a life, she exposed a cover-up that would shake the FBI to its core. This is the true story of the waitress who fought back. The restaurant was called the Gilded Table, a pretentiously dim establishment on Chicago's Gold Coast, where a Caesar salad cost $30, and the lighting was low enough to hide both affairs and business betrayals. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. Riley O'Neill adjusted her apron, feeling the familiar, dull ache in her lower back. She was 32, though her eyes looked older, watchful, tired, and unnervingly still. To the manager Todd, she was just Riley, the reliable hire who never complained, never called in sick, and never socialized. She had been working there for 6 months. She lived in a studio apartment in Pilsen, paid her bills in cash, and didn't own a smartphone. In reality, Riley O'Neill didn't exist. The woman pouring sparkling water into crystal glasses was formerly Captain Valerie Stone of the Defense Intelligence Agency's clandestine service. She was supposed to be dead. 2 years ago, a botched extraction in Damascus had left her team burned and her file erased. She had fled the grid, trading a Sig Sauer P320 for a notepad and pen. She wanted quiet. She wanted boredom. But trouble has a way of finding people who know how to handle it. Riley, Table 4 needs a refill on the Pinot. Move it, Todd snapped, snapping his fingers near her ear. Riley didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She just moved, her gait fluid and silent, a ghost gliding between tables. Table 4 was the VIP booth in the back corner, the one with the best sightlines of the door and the kitchen, a strategic spot. The man sitting there was Arthur Sterling. Everyone knew Arthur Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Aerospace, the man currently dominating the news cycle for his controversial drone defense contracts. He was 45, handsome in a sharp, predatory way, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Riley made in a year. Tonight, he was alone. That was unusual. Men like Sterling usually traveled with a phalanx of private security. Tonight, his bodyguards were conspicuously absent. Riley approached the table with the bottle of Pinot Noir. As she poured, her eyes instinctively scanned the room. It was a reflex she couldn't turn off, like breathing. 2 couples by the window. Harmless. A business meeting at table 6. Loud, drunk, distracted. The kitchen staff, stressed. Then the front door opened. The air in the room didn't change for anyone else, but for Riley the temperature dropped 10 degrees. 4 men walked in. They didn't look like diners. They didn't look like they were hungry. They wore heavy coats, despite the mild heating inside. They didn't wait for the hostess. They fanned out. 1 stayed by the door. 1 moved toward the kitchen entrance. 2 headed straight for the VIP booth. Riley stopped pouring. She didn't spill a drop. She set the bottle down on Arthur Sterling's table with a soft clink. Sterling looked up, annoyed. "I didn't ask for the check. You need to leave," Riley said. Her voice wasn't the polite, customer service voice she used all day. It was low, flat, and terrified of nothing. "Right now. Kitchen exit." Sterling frowned, looking at her name tag. "Excuse me?" "Don't look," she ordered, her hand resting casually on a heavy steak knife left by a previous bussing round on the adjacent service station. 4 men. Hard targets. They're closing a box around you. Where is your security details?" Sterling laughed, a dry, arrogant sound. "My security is outside. You're imagining things, honey. Just pour the wine." "Your security is dead or paid off," Riley said, her eyes locked on the reflection in the window behind Sterling. The man by the door had just locked it. He flipped the sign to closed. "They just locked the door," Riley whispered. Sterling turned his head. He saw the lock turn. He saw the man pull a suppressor out of his coat pocket and begin threading it onto a barrel. The blood drained from the billionaire's face so fast he looked like wax. "Oh God," Sterling whispered. "Get under the table," Riley commanded. "What?" "Get under the table." The restaurant fell silent. Not a natural silence, but the suffocating quiet of predators assessing prey. The other diners hadn't noticed the guns yet, but they sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. The leader of the group, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, later identified in police reports as Nikolai Volkov, a freelance wet work specialist wanted by Interpol, stepped into the center of the room. "Everyone stay calm," Volkov said. His voice was calm, heavily accented. "We are here for Mr. Sterling. The rest of you, heads on the table. Do not look up, and you go home to your families. Look up, and you die." Screams began to bubble up from table 6, but Volkov raised his pistol, a silenced Makarov, and fired a single shot into the ceiling. Thwip. Plaster rained down into a bowl of lobster bisque. The room froze. People scrambled under tables, sobbing into the carpet. Arthur Sterling was trembling. He was a master of the boardroom, a titan of industry. But here, in the primal calculus of violence, he was zero. He looked up at Riley, his eyes wide with the raw panic of a dying animal. "Help me," he wheezed. "I'll give you anything. $1 million. 10 million. Riley wasn't looking at him. She was calculating. 4 tangos. Tango 1, Volkov. Center room, clear line of fire. Tango 2, kitchen door, blocking exit. Tango 3, front door, blocking exit. Tango 4, closing in on the booth from the right flank. She had no gun. She had no backup. She had a steak knife and a ceramic plate. "Stay down, Arthur," Riley said softly. Tango 4 was approaching. He was big, wearing a leather jacket, holding a tactical shotgun loosely at his hip. He smirked when he saw Riley standing by the table. He didn't see a threat. He saw a waitress in a stained apron. "Move, girl," the man grunted, reaching out to shove her aside. That was his mistake. He invaded her kinetic circle. Riley didn't step back. She stepped in. In one blur of motion, her left hand trapped his wrist, redirecting the shotgun barrel toward the ceiling. Simultaneously, her right hand, holding the heavy ceramic dinner plate, smashed edge first into his throat. The sound was sickening, a wet crunch of cartilage. The man gagged, his hands flying to his crushed windpipe, dropping to the shotgun. Riley didn't hesitate. She caught the falling weapon before it hit the floor. She didn't try to fire it. Shotguns were loud and clumsy in close quarters. Instead, she spun, using the heavy stock of the gun as a battering ram. She drove it backward into the man's solar plexus, collapsing him instantly, then delivered a controlled kick to his temple. He went limp. Riley stood over him, breathing steady. She looked up. The room was deadly silent. Volkov, standing 20 feet away, stared at her. The boredom in his eyes was replaced by confusion, and then a flicker of professional recognition. "Who are you?" Volkov asked, raising his weapon. Riley kicked the shotgun under the table toward Sterling. "Stay down," she repeated to the billionaire. She grabbed a handful of steak knives from the silverware caddy on the table. "I'm the service," Riley said. The chaos that followed lasted exactly 90 seconds. but to the witnesses cowering under the tables, it felt like hours. Volkov didn't wait for an answer. He fired. Thwip, thwip. 2 rounds tore into the mahogany booth where Riley had been standing a fraction of a second before. She was gone. She had dropped to a crouch and rolled, moving behind the cover of a service cart filled with dirty dishes. "Get her!" Volkov screamed to the remaining 2 men. The man at the kitchen door, Tango 2, rushed forward, abandoning his post to flank her. The man at the front door, Tango 3, stayed put, keeping the civilians pinned, but his attention wavered. He was watching the girl. Riley knew she couldn't win a shootout. She had to close the distance. She grabbed a bottle of high-proof brandy from the service cart. She didn't drink. She used it. She hurled the bottle over the cart toward the kitchen entrance. Tango 2 saw the movement and fired, shattering the bottle in midair. Alcohol sprayed everywhere. Riley flicked a silver Zippo lighter, one she kept in her apron for lighting candles on birthday cakes, and tossed it into the puddle of spirits. Whoosh! A wall of blue flame erupted between her and Tango 2. He shouted, shielding his face and stumbling back. Riley used the distraction. She broke cover, sprinting, not away from the danger, but directly toward Volkov. Volkov adjusted his aim. He was a professional. He tracked her movement. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet grazed Riley's shoulder, tearing through the fabric of her uniform and searing her skin. She gritted her teeth but didn't slow down. Adrenaline dumped into her system, numbing the pain. She was 10 feet away. 5 feet. Volkov realized she wasn't stopping. He panicked, firing wildly. Riley slid across the polished floor like a baseball player stealing home, kicking Volkov's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, his gun skittering away under table 6. He scrambled to get up, pulling a knife from his belt, a serrated combat blade. Riley stood up, blood trickling down her arm. She held a steak knife in a reverse grip. They circled each other. The restaurant was silent again, save for the crackling of the small fire near the kitchen. "You move like military," Volkov growled, wiping blood from his lip. "American? CIA? I'm just a waitress," Riley said. Volkov lunged. It was a feint. He slashed high, then went low for her gut. Riley didn't block. She parried the low strike with her left forearm, sacrificing skin to save organs, and drove her right knee into his nose. Volkov stumbled back, blinded by tears and pain. Riley stepped in, grabbed his knife hand, twisted it with a specialized joint lock known only to elite grappling practitioners, and forced him to drop the blade. She spun him around, putting him in a chokehold. "Tell your men to drop the guns," she hissed into his ear, "or I snap your neck right here in front of the dessert cart." Volkov gargled, struggling for air. "Do it," he choked out. "We don't... Leave... witnesses." Riley tightened her grip. The man by the front door, Tango 3, raised his weapon, aiming not at Riley, but at the civilians. He was going to start executing hostages to force her hand. "Let him go!" Tango 3 screamed. "Or I kill the kid at table 2. Riley froze. She looked at table 2. A young mother was clutching a 6-year-old boy, their faces pressed into the carpet. Riley had a choice: save herself and the CEO, or risk everything for the kid. She released Volkov, shoving him forward. He gasped for air, falling to his hands and knees. "Smart girl," Tango 3 sneered, keeping his gun on the child. "Now hands up. Knees." Riley slowly raised her hands. Her eyes locked with Arthur Sterling, who was peeking out from under the booth. He had the shotgun she had kicked to him. He was holding it like a dead fish, his hands shaking violently. "Pick it up, Arthur," she willed him silently. "Pick it up." Sterling looked at the gun. He looked at Riley, standing there with blood on her arm, surrendering to save a child. Volkov stood up, retrieving his gun. He walked over to Riley, grinning. He pressed the barrel of the silencer against her forehead. "You are good," Volkov said. "But nobody is that good." He pulled back the hammer. Click. The restaurant exploded with noise. But it wasn't Volkov's gun. It was the shotgun. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire who had never fired a weapon in his life, had closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. The buckshot went wide, blowing apart a wine rack behind Volkov, showering the hitman in glass and expensive vintage red. It didn't hit Volkov, but it startled him enough. He flinched, turning his head. That was all Riley needed. She grabbed the hot barrel of Volkov's gun, twisting it away from her face as it discharged, the bullet shattering a light fixture above, and drove her palm into his nose, driving the bone into the brain. Volkov dropped like a stone. Dead before he hit the floor, Riley grabbed his gun. She dropped to one knee, took a breath, and aimed at the man by the door who was threatening the child. 30 yards, iron sights, heart rate 160. She exhaled. Bang! Tango 3 dropped, a single hole in the center of his chest. The threat was neutralized. Riley stood up in the ringing silence. Her apron was ruined, her arm was bleeding. The restaurant smelled of gunpowder, burnt brandy, and fear. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Arthur Sterling crawled out from under the table, staring at the carnage, and then at the woman wiping fingerprints off a Glock 19 with a napkin. "Who?" Sterling stammered, his voice cracking. "Who are you?" Riley placed the gun on the table. She looked at him, her eyes sad and incredibly weary. "I'm Riley," she said, "and you owe me a very big tip." The silence in the gilded table was shattered, not by more gunfire, but by the frantic, chaotic invasion of the Chicago Police Department. It started with the sirens, a rising wall of noise that penetrated the heavy velvet curtains. Then came the shouting, bullhorns, choppers overhead rattling the expensive wine glasses that hadn't already been smashed. Riley O'Neill stood by table 4. She had placed the Glock on the table, slide locked back, magazine removed. She stood with her hands clearly visible, palms open, near her shoulders. She knew the drill. When the adrenaline-fueled SWAT team breached the door, they wouldn't see a hero waitress. They would see a body count, weapons, and a person standing in the middle of it. In the kinetic confusion of a breach, movement drew fire. "Police! Get down! Get down!" The front door was kicked open, splintering the frame. 6 officers in heavy tactical gear poured in, rifles up, flashlights cutting through the gloom and smoke. "Don't shoot her!" Arthur Sterling screamed, scrambling up from the booth. He looked deranged, his bespoke suit stained with wine and plaster, his hair wild. "She saved us. She saved everyone." "Sir, get on the ground, now!" an officer bellowed, shoving Sterling back into the leather seat. Riley didn't speak. She slowly dropped to her knees, interlacing her fingers behind her head. She didn't look at the officers. She looked at the floor. She was de-escalating her own body language, making herself smaller, less threatening. An officer rushed her, grabbing her wrists and wrenching them behind her back. The handcuffs bit into her skin, tight and cold. "Suspect 1 secured," the officer shouted into his radio. "She's not a suspect." Sterling was yelling again, trying to stand up, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and leftover terror. "She's the damn victim. She works here. Get your hands off her." "Arthur, stop," Riley said calmly. Her voice cut through the noise, low and authoritative. It was the voice of a commander, not a waitress. "Let them do their job. Lawyer up. Don't say anything to the press." The officer hauling her up paused, looking at her. He expected hysteria. He expected tears. He didn't expect a woman who had just killed 3 men to be giving legal advice to a billionaire while bleeding from a gunshot wound. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," the officer began, reciting the Miranda warning as he marched her toward the shattered entrance. Riley didn't listen. She was busy analyzing the perimeter. Perimeter established. 2 ambulances. News vans already arriving. How did they get here so fast? Scanner chatter suggests they think this was a robbery gone wrong. They don't know it was a hit. As they led her out into the cool Chicago night, the flashing lights were blinding. A crowd had gathered behind the yellow tape. People were filming with phones. Riley lowered her head, letting her hair fall forward to obscure her face. She couldn't be seen. If her face hit the news, Valerie Stone, the dead CIA operative, would be resurrected. And that would bring enemies far worse than Nikolai Volkov to her door. They shoved her into the back of a squad car. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable. The smell of stale coffee and sanitizer filled the cage. Through the window she saw Arthur Sterling being led to an ambulance. He wasn't injured, just shaken. He stopped, planting his feet, and pointed a shaking finger at the lead detective, a weary-looking man in a trench coat. "If you mistreat her," Sterling shouted, loud enough for the press to hear, "I will sue this entire city into the Stone Age. I want my lawyer. Get me explicit confirmation on where she is going." Riley leaned her head back against the cage mesh and closed her eyes. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the throbbing pain in her shoulder where the bullet had grazed her. She was alive, but her quiet life in Chicago was over. Chicago Police Department, 18th District Station, 10:45 p.m. The interrogation room was a windowless box painted a depressing shade of institutional grey. A single steel table bolted to the floor. 3 chairs. A 2-way mirror that everyone knew was there but pretended not to notice. Riley sat on one side of the table. Her shoulder had been bandaged by a paramedic, but she was still in her bloodied waitress uniform. They had taken her apron, her shoes, and her belt. Detective Thomas Miller walked in. He was 50, tired, and carried a file folder like it weighed 100 pounds. He slammed it onto the table and sat down, staring at her. He didn't speak for a long minute. He just stared. "So," Miller said finally, popping the tab on a can of soda. "Riley O'Neill. That's the name on your employment forms. That's the name on your apartment lease in Pilsen. That's the name on your library card." Riley said nothing. She stared at a spot on the wall just above his left shoulder. "Here's the problem, Riley," Miller continued, leaning forward. "We ran your prints. Standard procedure for a homicide, even self-defense. And you know what came back?" He waited. Riley didn't blink. "Nothing," Miller whispered. "No matches in the state database. No matches in the FBI criminal database. No matches in the immigration database. It's like you were born this morning." "I have a clean record," Riley said softly. "Clean record is one thing," Miller snapped. "But no record? No birth certificate in the system matching your DOB? No social security history prior to 6 months ago? You're a ghost, lady." He opened the file. "And then there's the footage. I watched the security tape from the restaurant. I've been a cop for 25 years. I've seen bar fights. I've seen gang shootings. I've never seen that." He slid a photo across the table. It was a still frame from the CCTV. It showed Riley disarming Volkov. The technique was perfect. The leverage, the stance, the efficiency. "That's not self-defense class at the YWCA," Miller said. "That is military, special forces. Maybe foreign." "I grew up with brothers," Riley lied. It was a weak lie, and she knew it. "Brothers?" Miller scoffed. "Did your brothers teach you how to double-tap a moving target at 30 yards with a handgun you've never fired before? Because the ballistics report says you put a round through the third shooter's heart from across the room. Center mass. 1 shot." Miller stood up and walked to the mirror. He tapped on the glass. "Who are you really?" he asked. "Because you sure as hell aren't a waitress. And those guys you killed? We ID'd the leader, Nikolai Volkov, Russian national, ex-FSB, a hitman who charges $500,000 a contract. He doesn't rob restaurants. He assassinates heads of state. Riley's heart skipped a beat. If they ID'd Volkov that fast, the feds would be involved within the hour. I want a lawyer, Riley said. You need more than a lawyer, Miller said grimly. You need a priest. Because whoever sent Volkov, they aren't going to stop because a waitress got in the way. They're going to come for Sterling again. And they're going to come for you. The door to the interrogation room opened. It wasn't another cop. It was a man in a suit that cost more than Detective Miller's car. He carried a briefcase and an air of absolute, suffocating confidence. Detective Miller, the man said smoothly. I'm Jonathan Price. I represent Mr. Arthur Sterling. And as of 5 minutes ago, I represent Ms. O'Neill. Miller bristled. She's a suspect in a triple homicide investigation. You can't just... Self-defense, Price corrected, placing a document on the table. Clear cut. Mr. Sterling has already given his statement. Dozens of witnesses confirm the men initiated violence. Miss O'Neill acted to preserve human life. Now, unless you are charging her, I am taking my client home. We haven't ID'd her yet, Miller argued. She has no background. She is an employee of my client, Price said, his eyes hard. Mr. Sterling vouches for her. I have a bail bondsman in the lobby with a check for whatever number you dream up. But you won't charge her, because if you arrest the woman who saved Chicago's favorite billionaire from a terrorist attack, the mayor will have your badge for breakfast. Miller looked at Price, then he looked at Riley. He knew he was beaten. Politics always beat police work. Fine, Miller spat. But don't leave town. The FBI is on their way. They're going to want to talk to her. We'll be in touch, Price said. He looked at Riley. Ms. O'Neill, my car is waiting. Riley stood up. Her legs felt heavy. She walked out of the room, past the angry detective, and into the corridor. But as she walked, she knew something Price didn't. The FBI wasn't coming to investigate the shooting. Once her fingerprints hit the national level, they would flag the deleted files of the DIA. The CIA wasn't coming to interview her. They were coming to bury her. The car was a darkly tinted Maybach, idling in the back alley of the police station to avoid the press swarm out front. Jonathan Price opened the door for Riley. Inside, Arthur Sterling was waiting. He looked better. He had changed into a fresh shirt, likely brought by an assistant, and was drinking whiskey from a crystal tumbler built into the car's console, but his hands were still trembling slightly. Riley, Sterling said, breathing out a sigh of relief. Jesus, I thought they were going to book you. They wanted to, Riley said, sliding into the soft leather seat. Thank you for the lawyer. Least I could do, Sterling said. You saved my life. I don't even know how to process what happened back there. The car pulled away, gliding silently through the Chicago streets. It was raining now, the neon lights of the city smearing across the wet windows. Where are we going? Riley asked. My place, Sterling said. The penthouse at the Sterling Tower. It's the safest place in the city. Private security, reinforced glass, biometric elevators. You can't go back to your apartment, Riley. Whoever sent those men, they know who you are now. Riley looked at him. They know who you are, Arthur. I was just collateral. Sterling shook his head. He took a long sip of whiskey. You were collateral until you killed Volkov. Now you're a loose end. A variable they didn't account for. They'll want to know who you are and who you work for. He turned to face her, his expression sharpening. The fearful victim was gone, replaced by the CEO who managed billions of dollars in defense contracts. Which brings me to my question, Sterling said quietly. Who do you work for? Because my head of security, who is currently fired, by the way, tells me that the move you used on the guy with the shotgun is a Krav Maga variant used specifically by the Israeli Mossad and American Tier 1 operators. You're not a waitress. Riley looked out the window. She saw a police cruiser speed past in the opposite direction. I used to be, Riley said. Used to be a lot of things. Now I just serve tables. Not anymore, Sterling said. I'm hiring you. Riley laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I don't need a job, Arthur. I need to disappear. As soon as this car stops, I'm gone. I have a go bag stashed in a locker at Union Station. By morning, I'll be in Toronto. If you run, they will hunt you, Sterling said. You have no resources, no support. You're burning an identity that is already thin. But if you stay, I have resources, I have money, and I have the best surveillance tech on the planet. Riley hesitated. He was right. Her Riley O'Neill identity was blown. If she ran now, she'd be running blind. What do you want, Arthur? I want to know who tried to kill me, Sterling said, his voice cold. I have enemies, competitors. But Volkov, that's not corporate espionage. That's a sanctioned hit. Someone high up wants me dead. I need a bodyguard who can see things my regular guys can't. I need you. The car slowed down. They were approaching the Sterling Tower, a monolithic glass needle piercing the Chicago skyline. I charge more than minimum wage, Riley said. I'll pay you $5 million, Sterling said, without blinking. And I'll use my connections to scrub your file, whatever past you're running from. I can bury it so deep even the NSA won't find it. That got her attention. The car pulled into the underground garage. Massive steel gates rolled shut behind them. Security guards with assault rifles, real professionals this time, were waiting by the elevator. They went up to the 90th floor. The penthouse was a fortress of luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the glass was 3 inches thick and bulletproof. Make yourself at home, Sterling said. I have a medical team coming to look at your shoulder. Riley walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. She felt trapped. A gilded cage was still a cage. Suddenly, Sterling's phone rang. It wasn't his cell phone. It was a secure line, a red landline phone sitting on his heavy oak desk. Sterling frowned. Nobody has this number except the board of directors, and he picked it up. Sterling. He listened for a moment. His face went pale. He looked at Riley. Put her on, Sterling said into the phone. He held the receiver out to Riley. It's for you. Riley froze. Who is it? He didn't say his name, Sterling whispered. He said, tell Agent Stone that the Damascus file is open again. Riley felt the blood drain from her face. Agent Stone, the name she hadn't heard in 2 years, the name that was supposed to be on a gravestone. She walked over and took the phone. Her hand was steady, but her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This is Riley, she said. Hello, Valeri, a voice on the other end said. It was a digital voice, synthesized to hide the speaker's identity, but the cadence was familiar. Impressive work at the restaurant, sloppy but effective. Who is this? A friend, or at least a mutual acquaintance, the voice said. You think Volkov was there for Sterling? You're wrong. Volkov was the bait. Bait for what? To flush you out, the voice said. We knew you were in Chicago. We just didn't know exactly where. We needed you to reveal yourself. And you did beautifully. You saved the billionaire. You made the news. Now we have a visual confirmation. Riley's grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. You sent a hit squad into a restaurant, full of civilians just to find me. We are pragmatic, Valerie. You know this. You have something that belongs to us. The drive you took from Damascus. We want it back." "I destroyed it," Riley lied. "No," the voice purred. "You didn't. You're a hoarder, Valerie. You keep insurance. Bring the drive to the Navy Pier. Tomorrow night, midnight. End of the dock. Alone. If you don't..." The voice paused. "If I don't?" "Mr. Sterling has a lovely niece in boarding school in Connecticut. Sarah. 12 years old. Very cute. It would be a shame if she had an accident." The line went dead. Riley slowly placed the phone back on the receiver. Sterling was watching her. "What is it? What's going on?" Riley looked at the billionaire. He had offered her $5 million and safety, but he was the one in danger now because of her. The hit wasn't on him. It was never on him. He was just the stage they set to make her perform. "We have a problem," Riley said, "and your security isn't going to be enough." The revelation shifted the gravity in the room. Arthur Sterling, master of the universe, sat heavily in his leather chair. He looked smaller. "They used me," Sterling asked, his voice quiet. "They attacked me. To get to you?" "You were the perfect lure," Riley explained, pacing the room. Her mind was in tactical overdrive. High profile. If you get attacked, it makes national news. If I intervene, I'm on camera. If I don't, you die, and they keep searching. It was a win-win for them. "Who are they?" "A splinter group of the Defense Intelligence Agency," Riley said. Section 7. They don't officially exist. They handle the dirty work that the CIA finds too illegal. Assassinations, coups, black market arms dealing. "And you were one of them?" "I was their best," Riley said without pride. "Until I found out what they were really doing in Syria. They weren't fighting terrorists. They were arming them to destabilize the region for profit. I stole the ledger, a hard drive with all their transaction records, and I ran. They blew up my safe house. They killed my team. I was the only one who made it out." Sterling stared at her. "And the drive? Do you have it?" Riley stopped pacing. She reached into her boot. She didn't pull out a knife. She pried off the heel of her heavy work boot, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside was a small, silver USB drive wrapped in plastic. "I never go anywhere without it," she said. "This is the insurance policy. It contains names, bank accounts, dates. Enough to send half the Pentagon to federal prison for treason." "So give it to them," Sterling said. "Give it to the FBI. The real FBI." "There is no real FBI when it comes to Section 7, Riley said. "They have moles everywhere. If I hand this over to the wrong person, I disappear. And so do you." Sterling stood up. He walked to the window, looking at his reflection. "They threatened my niece," he said. "Yes." Sterling turned around. His fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard anger. He hadn't built a $40 billion empire by backing down from threats. "Nobody touches my family," Sterling said. "Nobody. You said they want to meet tomorrow at Navy Pier?" "Midnight. It's a trap, obviously. They'll have snipers, a containment team. They plan to take the drive and kill us both." "Good," Sterling said. A grim smile touched his lips. "Good?" Riley looked at him like he was insane. "I design drone defense systems, Riley. My company, Sterling Aerospace, builds the most advanced urban surveillance and combat drones in the world. The military buys the watered-down versions. I keep the prototypes." He walked to a wall panel and pressed his hand against a scanner. The wall slid open, revealing a command center that looked like the bridge of a starship. Screens flickered to life. "You have the tactical skills," Sterling said. "I have the technology. They think they're setting a trap for a waitress and a scared CEO. Let's show them what they're really dealing with." Riley looked at the screens. She looked at the drive in her hand. For 2 years she had been running, hiding, waiting for the axe to fall. She was tired of running. "We need a plan," Riley said. "A loud one." "I like loud," Sterling replied. The next night, 11:45 p.m. Navy Pier, Chicago. The pier was deserted. The Ferris wheel stood silent and dark against the winter sky. The wind coming off Lake Michigan was biting cold. Riley walked down the wooden planks alone. She wore a heavy black coat, her hands in her pockets. The wind whipped her hair around her face. At the end of the pier, a single figure was waiting. He stood under a flickering lamp post. He wore a long grey trench coat. It was the man from the phone, the handler. "You came?" he said. His voice was smooth, cultured. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a university professor. "I want the girl safe," Riley said, stopping 10 feet away. "The girl is fine," the handler said. "We are not monsters, Valerie. We are patriots. We do what is necessary to keep the wheels turning. The drive, please." Riley pulled her hand out of her pocket. She held up the silver USB drive. "It's all here," she said. "Syria, the arms deals, the slush funds." "Excellent." The handler took a step forward. "Give it to me and you can walk away. You can go back to pouring water. We will forget you exist." "You're lying," Riley said. The handler smiled. It was a cruel, thin smile. "Yes, I am." He raised his hand. From the shadows of the closed carousel and the darkened food stalls, a dozen men emerged. They were dressed in black tactical gear, night vision goggles lowered. Red laser dots danced across Riley's chest. "Kill her," the handler said boredly. "Take the drive." "Now!" Riley shouted into her lapel. "Hum." The air suddenly vibrated with a low-frequency hum. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The handler looked up. Rising from the dark water of Lake Michigan, circling the pier like a swarm of angry hornets, were 50 quadcopter drones. They were matte black, silent, and armed. Sterling's voice crackled in Riley's earpiece. "Targets acquired. Locking on." The drones didn't fire bullets. They fired high-intensity blinding strobe lights and sonic suppression waves. Flash. The pier was bathed in a light brighter than the sun. The hit squad screamed, clutching their eyes, their night vision goggles magnifying the flash into blinding pain. Boom! Sonic cannons fired from the drones, knocking the men off their feet with concussive force. Riley moved. She didn't run away. She ran forward. She tackled the handler, driving him into the wooden planks. The USB drive skittered away. He reached for a pistol inside his coat, but Riley jammed her thumb into a nerve cluster in his neck. He screamed, his arm going numb. "Call them off!" Riley shouted over the roar of the drones. "You can't win!" The handler spat, blood on his teeth. "We are the government. You are just—" "I'm the one holding the gun," Riley said, pulling his own weapon and pressing it to his chin. The mercenaries were in disarray, pinned down by the hovering drones that buzzed inches from their faces, daring them to move. Suddenly, a spotlight from a helicopter hit the pier. But it wasn't a police chopper. It was a Black Hawk. Men fast-roped down onto the pier. They moved with a precision that made the mercenaries look like amateurs. They wore FBI jackets. At the front was a woman with stern eyes and a megaphone. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. This area is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice." The handler's eyes went wide. "Vance," he whispered. "Agent Vance?" Riley asked. "The only person in Washington I'm afraid of," the handler muttered. The FBI team swarmed the pier, zip-tying the blinded mercenaries. Agent Vance walked straight up to Riley and the handler. She looked down at the man on the ground. "Section 7, Vance said with disgust. "We've been trying to pin you down for 5 years." She looked at Riley. Captain Stone, you're hard to find." Riley stood up, keeping the gun pointed at the ground. "I didn't want to be found." "Arthur Sterling sent us your drive about an hour ago," Vance said. "Encrypted channel, we opened it. It's quite a read. Treason, racketeering, murder." Riley looked at the sky, where the drones were slowly retreating back into the darkness. Sterling had done it. He hadn't just provided backup. He had leaked the info to the one honest faction left in the DOJ before the meeting even started. "Is it over?" Riley asked. Vance looked at the handcuffed handler being dragged away. "For them? Yes. They're going to black sites they built themselves. For you?" Vance sighed. "You're a ghost, Stone. You're legally dead. And honestly, with the enemies you have, maybe it's better you stay that way." She gestured to the end of the pier. A small speedboat was waiting there, engine idling. "Sterling left that for you," Vance said. "There's a bag inside, new passport, new name, and a consulting contract for Sterling Aerospace, if you want it." Riley looked at Vance. "You're letting me go?" "I don't see anyone," Vance said, turning her back. "Just a crime scene." The fallout from the night at Navy Pier was not a ripple. It was a tidal wave that washed over Washington, D.C., thanks to the data Arthur Sterling had decrypted. For weeks, the news cycle was dominated by the Sterling leak. It wasn't framed as a spy story. The government was too careful for that. Instead, it was framed as a massive corruption scandal within the defense contracting sector. High-ranking generals resigned in disgrace. Several mid-level bureaucrats at the Pentagon were indicted on charges of embezzlement and racketeering. The shadow organization, known as Section 7, didn't officially exist in the papers, but the sudden death of its leader, a man known only as the Handler, due to a heart attack in federal custody, closed the book on their operations. Arthur Sterling sat in his office at the top of the Sterling Tower, looking out at the snow falling over Chicago. It had been 3 months since the attack in the Gilded Table. The restaurant never reopened. It remained boarded up, a shrine to the violence that had erupted there. Sterling spun a pen between his fingers. He had changed. The arrogance that had defined his career was tempered now by a quiet intensity. He had fired his entire previous security detail, the men who had been paid off to leave him vulnerable that night. In their place, he had hired a team of veterans vetted personally by Agent Vance. But there was one empty chair in his security office, the position of Chief Strategy Officer. He looked at the postcard sitting on his desk. It had no return address. The postmark was from St. Lucia, a small island nation in the Caribbean. The card had no message, no signature, just a picture of a pristine, white sand beach and a single set of footprints leading into the water, and drawn in the corner, a tiny, simple sketch of a wine bottle. Sterling smiled. St. Lucia, the Jade Mountain Resort. The Caribbean sun was a stark contrast to the grey slush of Chicago. The resort was exclusive, the kind of place where billionaires went to forget they were billionaires for a week. A woman sat at the bar overlooking the Petons. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses. Her skin was tanned, the scar on her shoulder from a bullet graze, now just a faint pink line. The bartender, a young local man named Julian, placed a sparkling water in front of her. "Quiet day, Miss Davis," Julian said. "Quiet is good, Julian," the woman replied. Her new passport said her name was Eleanor Davis. She was listed as a freelance logistics consultant. She lived in a villa halfway up the mountain, paid for by a shell company routed through the Cayman Islands. She took a sip of the water. Her eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, were still scanning the room. Couple at the corner table. Honeymooners. Harmless. Staff member by the pool. Carrying towels. Gate is heavy. checking. She watched the staff member. He walked with a limp, not an injury, but a rhythmic imbalance. He was carrying the towels with his left hand, his right hand hovering near his waist. Riley, now Eleanor, felt that familiar electric hum in her spine. She didn't move. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't have to. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A text message. Sender, unknown. Message, target verified. Blue shirt. 3 o'clock. Sterling sends his regards. Riley glanced at her phone, then back at the man with the towels. Before the man could take another 5 steps, 2 men in swim trunks rose from lounge chairs on either side of the pool. They looked like tourists, but they moved like wolves. They intercepted the towel carrier, flanked him, and quietly escorted him away from the guests before he could even draw the weapon concealed in his waistband. Riley took another sip of her water. Sterling had kept his promise. He hadn't just given her money. He had given her a shield. He had used his technology to build a digital fortress around her. Any known associate of Section 7 who booked a flight to the Caribbean flagged a silent alarm in Sterling's server room in Chicago. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was protected. Later that evening, Riley walked down to the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. She thought about the life she had tried to live in Chicago, the apron, the sore feet, the invisibility. She had wanted to be nobody. But she realized now that she couldn't be nobody. The training, the instincts, they were part of her DNA. You can't ask a tiger to be a house cat just because you put a collar on it. Her phone rang again. This time it was a voice call. She picked it up. Davis. It's Arthur, the voice said. The signal was crystal clear, encrypted. Did the package arrive? The local security took care of it, Riley said. Thank you. Don't thank me, Arthur said. It's part of the contract. How is retirement? Riley looked out at the ocean. Boring. Arthur chuckled. I thought you might say that. That's why I'm calling. Agent Vance reached out to me. The DOJ is putting together a specialized task force. Off the books, but legal. They go after human traffickers, arms dealers, the people the law can't touch because of jurisdiction issues. Riley listened. The sound of the waves crashed against the shore. They need a field commander, Arthur continued. Someone who doesn't exist. Someone who can walk into a room, assess a threat in 3 seconds, and neutralize it with a dinner plate if necessary. Riley smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had worn in years. Does it pay well? Better than tips, Arthur said. And I'll handle the tech support. Drone overwatch for every mission. You'll never be alone out there again. Riley looked down at her hands. They were steady. They were strong. They were the hands of someone who could save a life or end one. For a long time, she had hated that about herself. Now, she accepted it. Tell Vance I'm in, Riley said. But I have one condition. Name it. I want to pick my own team, she said. No bureaucrats, no spies. I want professionals. Done, Arthur said. Welcome back to the world of the living, Riley. She hung up the phone. She took off her sunglasses and looked at the horizon. The waitress from the gilded table was gone. Valerie Stone was dead. But the woman standing on the beach? She was just getting started. She turned and walked back toward the villa, her stride long and purposeful. The sun dipped below the water, extinguishing the light. But Riley wasn't afraid of the dark. She knew that sometimes the only way to protect the light was to be the thing that hunted in the shadows. And that is the story of how a simple dinner service turned into a war zone, and how a billionaire discovered that the most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one with the gun. Sometimes it's the one pouring the water. The incident at the gilded table remains a classified case file in the Chicago Police Department archives, a testament to the fact that heroes often wear the most unassuming disguises. Arthur Sterling continues to run his empire, but rumor has it that every year, on November 14th, he visits a closed-down restaurant on the Gold Coast and leaves a bottle of Pinot Noir and a single heavy tip on table 4. As for the waitress, she was never seen in Chicago again, but in the dark corners of the world where bad men try to hurt the innocent, there are whispers of a ghost who moves like the wind and hits like a freight train. Wow, what a ride. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more thrillers like this one. Do you think you would have noticed if your waitress was a secret agent? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload brand new, high-intensity narratives every week.